Hey everybody and welcome back to another video. In today's video we are talking about the new movie Last Breath. This is a true story about a diving mission gone wrong, basically. Um, this movie was, I think, written and directed by the director's Alex Parkinson. Yeah, he
He's
is
one of the
one of the
writers.
writers. There's a couple of others as well. The movie stars Woody Harrelson, hopefully I say this right, Simu Liu, and Finn Cole. Um, in
Don't
this
forget about Cliff
movie,
Curtis because he's a big actor too.
what's that?
Cliff Curtis,
Okay.
he's from Fear
Um,
of the Walking Dead. At least that's what I know him from.
all right. I didn't watch that show, so I didn't know. Um, so a little bit of background on this movie. We did a little bit of homework to see what was going on behind the scenes. You know, when you see that a movie says it's based on a true story, you want to know, well, what is true and what's Hollywoodized, right? And basically, what I found is that the director, Alex Parkinson, made a documentary about this situation years ago, like 2012, I think it was that I read, and basically loves this story so much that instead of now having just the documentary version, you want to make basically like a drama reimagining of what happened. And so that's what we got today. Um, I find it interesting because it seems like, well, he basically had the blueprint for the whole movie this whole time, and basically he just had to, put it in terms of, film that we normally go and see at the movie theater, not documentary style. Um, I personally really liked the movie. I thought that the when you think about movies that are, based on true stories, you get to forget about the things that are like, oh, that would never happen. Oh, there's no way that that can happen because if it did happen, the proof is in the pudding. So I really like that element of it. The sound design I thought was pretty good and intense. The music, it was interesting because like yeah, one of the big things that happens during this movie is that they're like 300 feet down into the water and they're attached to the boat that's up top. And one of the things that's going on is that there's a storm. And so the boat is swelling up and down with the waves. And what I thought was interesting is that's exactly what was happening with the music quite a bit of times when they were going through tense moments. There was swelling of the music. So a lot of that stuff complemented one another. Um, I did not know what the true story was, so you can kind of predict what's going to happen, right? If when they say it's based on this amazing true story, typically you know what's going to happen towards the end. But I still found myself kind of wondering, like, is he though? Is he? Like, there's a lot of things that happen that lead us to believe one way, even though I think ultimately, we can probably all come to an agreement that it's going to end another way. Avoiding spoilers, but I think you get my drift.
You should be
No.
able to gather it from the trailer, I think.
No pun intended. But yeah, I liked Woody Harrelson's character. I thought his character was going to have a little bit more involvement with the story. Um, I'm not going to say too much about that, but I didn't realize that the dynamic of his character is what it was. Um, I thought the other actors did a good job. I thought it was interesting to not only have the perspective of what's happening underwater, but also the big problem that was happening up on the boat itself. And so, like I said, all in all, I liked the movie. But I know we're a polar opposite today. So what do you got for us, Sarah?
I wish that I could see the documentary because I feel like that is the story that I would enjoy a lot more or find more entertaining or interesting or just hold my attention better for lack of better words. I feel like the acting was kind of stale. I feel like the story was bland. The main idea of the story was intense, but the intensity was not throughout the film. I feel like it was honestly for me it was kind of boring for the bulk of the film. There was nothing that really made me feel for any of the characters. I feel like we didn't have any time for character development. I feel like the ones that, had things going on where they were in trouble or, like this is a dangerous job and here's what I'm coming back home to. Like they were just such boring cliches with nothing to really show us why we actually care other than just saying like, "Oh, I got a wife back home." Like, okay.
We
Um,
did see the wife.
I mean, we saw her, but it it didn't do anything for me. I didn't feel the connection. It felt bland. Um, The music I think was over the top personally. There was like ridiculously intense music and then just nothing. And I get what you're saying about the swelling of the waves and all that, but to me it just seemed like the only reason why the intensity was there was because the music was intense, not because you felt the intensity of the scene. Um, just overall, it wasn't done in a way that I think held my attention very well, and I think that a documentary style might have been the way to go. And it's funny because I thought that before even knowing that there really was a documentary on this originally, and it makes me want to go see that now because I feel like that's the film that I would really want to see compared to what we saw today.
I think there's a big difference between the fact that this was a true story and a movie that could be fictional. Like, if this was a fictional movie, I think I could see a little bit more of your opinion about, things maybe being a little boring because if it was fictional, things would be like 10 times more exaggerated. But, if this is really what happened and if you in my opinion, if you put yourself in those shoes, like the dude was walking around in pitch black with one light in front of him, and he was down there conscious for like 10 minutes or so on his own. I think I'd probably pass out within a couple minutes knowing that. Like, I'm 300 feet below the surface. There's nobody around. The one thing that I kind of wondered, and we talked about this on the ride home a little bit, is I was surprised there wasn't any like wildlife that was around. Like, I feel like that might heighten things a little bit. Like, did the dude see any fish like, swim right by his face or anything while he was down there? Maybe there wasn't many, animals down there because they were around, this thing that lights up and probably makes a bunch of noise. I don't know. I don't know anything about that profession or the sea life that's down there. But putting yourself in the shoes of that guy, I think that's pretty intense. It's not like when the movie The Meg 2, I think it was, when they went underwater and they were investigating things and then, they had to find their way back to the surface. Like, that's not nearly as intense in my opinion because it's all fake. But the fact that this is real, I think adds a different lens to watching it. So, I don't know. Maybe I was watching it through that lens and maybe you were looking for more entertainment, so that could have been the difference.
Knowing that this was based on a true story, I think is the only thing that kept me from walking out of the theater.
Wow. Wow.
I'm sorry. I know it's harsh. This was the, it felt like it dragged for so much of it. And it was only an hour and a half. Like it's not that long of a movie, but I don't know.
What part of it would you so we all know what this movie is about, right? So what would you say is an example of something that dragged?
The first half hour,
So the first half hour is all character development. You just complained that there wasn't any character development.
I feel like they breezed right through it and didn't focus on anything. It was just him walking around.
So
Hey,
the
so and so, hey, so and so. Like that's it.
so maybe if we got like an extra half hour or so of them interacting and living in these tubes for quite some time to get some character development, maybe.
Maybe for them to just not be such stale at acting, because I know these people are good actors. I know they can do it, but it felt like it was so lacking.
I don't know. I think I was still just like if knowing the the pressure of the job and what they're about to do, I feel like I wouldn't be jolly and merry or anything like that. I feel like I would be probably right there with it with the anxieties of thinking like I could go down here and never see anybody again. Like as soon as you get in that tube, you're gone from society for quite some time because not only does it take time to be prepared to go down there because your body has to go through some changes, but then you got to go down there, you got to do the real thing, and then when you come back, you still got to live in isolation for quite a while. So I don't know.
I hear you, and I know that as a fact, but I didn't feel it from the movie.
Gotcha. So what would you rate this movie out of 10?
I'm at a 3. I I don't know that I could quite go down to a 2, but honestly, I think the only thing that's saving it from that is just because it is based on a true story, and so like the idea of the story is there, and I feel like that's, I mean, it's a story worth telling. It's just I really didn't like how it was told. I will not be watching this film again. I have no interest in a repeat watch.
I'm just looking at our ratings that we've done so far, and I'm thinking like, because in my opinion, there's a lot of movies that we have seen this year that I thought were kind of boring. Like I thought The Monkey was super boring. Unless you want to see more of what's in the commercial, Captain America was arguably kind of boring, average at best. Um, I don't know. I would probably give Last Breath a solid 8 out of 10 for myself. Uh, I think, and I don't know, maybe it's because I will say when we first got in the theater and we were listening to some of the previews, I did think it was a little loud in there. Like when we saw the monkey, I thought I could barely hear the movie at times, and maybe that played a part in it for when you're talking about how the music was a little loud and stuff. But I don't know. I feel like having like I went through a music program. I think I understand music a little bit better than Sarah in this sense. So I have a little bit of a different lens to watch this movie. So I feel like I get that part. Um, but at the same time, if I went into Sarah's realm of music and I could see things completely different, right? So I don't know. It's
I understand the need for intense music. I just feel like they were banking on it too much.
all right. Well, we are gonna switch over to spoilers here. There won't be.
But before we get to spoilers, can you explain 8 out of 10, like 1 out of 5, 1 out of 10, like why you had an 8?
I think the movie is definitely above average. It kept my attention. I know it definitely kept my dad's attention when we were all watching the movie. I thought it was interesting. So me and my dad, it kept our attention. I know you and your mom, you guys were pretty bored with it. Even your mom mentioned she found herself dozing off a couple of times, which I really don't know how you could with how loud it was, but it is what it is. Um, I would agree that I don't think it's a perfect movie by any means, but it's just kind of that gut feeling of like, if I think about it, is this a 10 out of 10? Probably not. I'm probably on a little bit of a bias high when I think about that. Is it a movie that I would watch again? Probably. It's not my go-to because I have tons of movies that I like to put in the background, but like if I was back in the day in the 90s flipping through channels looking for something to watch, I'd probably watch it again. Or, let's say I have a kid someday and my kid's like, I want to be a marine biologist. I'll be like, you want to think again and watch this movie? Um, I don't know. I feel like the fact that it's a true story, it adds some depth there to it. And I don't know, it could be a very good example even for like, because I work in education. It could be a good example of, just the human spirit of not wanting to leave. And, I can't say too much because we're not in the spoiler section, but, there's a lot of times during the events where people on the ship could have said, screw it, we're out of here. And, what was going to happen is what was going to happen with leaving this guy behind. And they didn't. They all truly believed that, you know, they're all a unit. They're all in this together, and they were not going to leave this place without absolutely putting their best foot forward and trying to bring everybody home, regardless of the result of the mission. And so, I don't know. I feel like this movie has, even though it's only an hour and a half, um, I actually would like when I see that it's an hour and a half, and after seeing the movie. And in my opinion, feeling like the music and what was happening was keeping the momentum going with the intensity. I feel like if you put some fluff in there somewhere to get more character development, I think that slows it down. And I think what the director was trying to do was that they were trying to make this movie where you you can't get up to go to the bathroom. Like you have to be engaged with what is happening. Is this dude gonna make it out alive? Um, there were different things that the people were doing trying to save the guy. Are these things going to work out? So I don't know. I think the movie is above average. I could see where some people maybe wouldn't like it, but I just think it's a solid 8. When I think about the ratings, I kind of go with my gut where I'll be like, okay, is this a 10? And if I get slightly nauseous, I'm like, okay, that's probably a mistake. Um, and if I think about like giving this movie a 1, I'm like, there's no way that was a 1. So I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just kind of a thinking about what I experienced, thinking like I'm about to tell somebody that this is a 10 out of 10 movie. How do I feel about that? And if I feel like I'm gonna regret saying that because it's not what it is, then I'm not gonna say it. And that's kind of how I adjust where I'm at with these films. So that was my like 6 minute rant of how I rate movies. But
I'm just going to take one last poke and say I think it's funny you mentioned if somebody was going to be a marine biologist, and there was zero marine biology in this movie.
you know what I'm talking about. If you're gonna go work in the water.
Ready for spoilers.
All right. I guess we're ready for some spoilers. Um, Okay, so we know this is a mission. There's this squad that's gonna go down. It's like 300 feet below the surface, and they're there to repair a gas line, basically. And they need to get in there, repair it, get out. And so the beginning of the movie, we get some character development with the wife, where we kind of know, hey, they're engaged, they're not married yet, so we kind of get that trope going on. It's kind of hard to call it a trope if that's really what happened, but it is what it is, trying to pull at your heartstrings. Then we meet the crew, which is Woody Harrelson's character Duncan, Simu's character Dave. We've already met Chris, which actor's name's Finn Cole. Um, and we kind of learned that Dave is a little uptight. He's there to do his job, but at the same time, he's kind of like the muscle guy that doesn't want to come off as soft, in my opinion. Duncan actually makes a comment to Chris about that before they get in the tubes and start adjusting their body. But we dive right into things. They get into the tube. We probably only spend like 5 or 10 minutes of seeing them living this life, even though that life probably covers a week or two at least, because you have to get your body to be adjusted to what you're going to be experiencing way under the water. Um, because they even mention in here, if you were to go down there right now, your organs would explode, basically, is what they said. And so they have to take some time to get adjusted. But once they're ready, they get to the site, they get in a smaller container or containment thing, whatever you want to call it, and then they lower themselves down to where the site is. And we have Dave going first, he's diver one, and then Chris goes in as diver two. They get down there and they're doing their thing. And honestly, Chris was weaving himself through this place a bit much. Like, I was like, no wonder something's going to happen to your cable because you're doing all this stuff. Whereas it seems like Dave was kind of being very minimal about how many turns he was doing while doing this job. But basically, some stuff happens up top where the main boat cannot combat basically the waves. They're being pushed in other directions from the ocean and the storm. And so what this is going to cause is it's going to cause the boat to move. They can't drop anchors because there's an issue with that too. The captain was saying something along the lines of if we drop certain anchors, they can cause an environmental problem. Maybe they would break the line. I don't know.
I think they were worried it would get caught on the line.
And so with the boat doing that, it was going to cause like if you don't get out and have your cord untangled from where they were at the work site, then it was going to get caught and ripped. So their job was to get out. So Dave and Chris, they start, climbing the top of the thing by pulling on their cord. They call it the umbilical cord. And they get to, well, Dave gets to the top, and Chris, he's almost to the top. He's like right about to get over the edge, and he realizes that his cord is hooked on something behind him, and he can't get it undone in time. Dave basically tells him, "Hey, this is what's going to happen. Stay with me. Your cord is going to snap." And so the main oxygen line is gone once this snap happens. So he has to turn something else on. So he has basically an emergency set of oxygen, which will only last about 10 minutes. So Dave tells him, I will come back for you. I can't find you out here. So, you know, get back to the top of this building so I know where to look for you. And so Chris gets swept down towards the like bottom of the fixture, and he's now down there all by himself. Dave goes back and he's now with Duncan. All right, do you want to take a turn?
Um, I mean, they're having issues with the boat because all of their turbos or jets or whatever you want to call them are offline, and essentially the whole ship winds up going offline. They kick it into manual, so they manually steer it back to where they need to be, but it's tricky because they usually only do that in like extreme emergencies. And of course, everything's like, we've never really done this before, but we have to right now because it's either this or he's gone. Um, there's a lot of different mechanical things going on with the boat. Up top, some rewiring and rerouting of power to try to figure out how to get it back to having everything online. So there's some mayhem going on with that.
I will say I did not understand any of that stuff. I was hoping maybe you would because you're an engineer, but I was just like, that guy is gonna do something cool with some wires. Got it. That's basically how I interpreted it.
So something along the lines of for them to do a full system reboot, it would take hours, but that's the only way to get the power back to the engines. And so he was rerouting the cables in the network on the, I don't know, there was like a whole web of cables, and he was rerouting them that way they could reboot the power without it taking hours to get everything back online.
Yeah, when I was watching him looking through all the chords, I was thinking like, dang, there's so many chords. Like, how could you completely understand all those things? But I mean, that's his job.
A
So
lot of little labels.
yeah, no kidding. Like, I freak out sometimes just looking behind the TV and seeing what's come of all the different systems behind the TV with the consoles. But this was definitely a step above that.
Yeah. So we've got Dave and Duncan who are sitting in the bell or like the little dive pod, if you will. So they're like in they're in a chamber of air, but with the water at their feet, right? Like so he's ready to go back down at any minute. They use the guys on the ship, they have a little camera diver light drone, if you will. So they go down there to try to find Chris, and they are able to find him. They have a hook and their machine is rated to be able to pick him up and they're able to hook him, But before he went unconscious,
It-
he hooked his carabiner to the like ship or not ship, the station. So without undoing that carabiner, the machine can't pick him up to bring him back to the bell.
and mind you, he's been laying unconscious. Like he ran out of oxygen and, he's completely passed out. His body is twitching, but it's only because of a lack of oxygen to the brain.
Yep. So I mean, good that he's hooked because then the waves can't sweep him away, but bad that he's hooked because then the little drone can't lift him back to there. So they need an actual diver to go down there and get him. Um, Eventually, they are able to stabilize the boat enough. Their rerouting of the power works. So they're able to get the bell back to a depth where Dave is able to go get him. Um, so he hooks himself, basically hooks his carabiner to Dave's or Chris's and Dave's carabiners together, right? So they're attached together, but the one guy's unconscious. So I mean, for lack of better words, it's dead weight, which is really heavy to pull, especially at depths like that when the pressure is so high. But there's still a lot of waves, and so they almost get hit by the bell because the bell is like crashing down into the station that's down there, but they're able to like narrowly avoid it so they don't get two divers unconscious, so that's good. Um, a lot of hard lifting by Dave to pull back up that cord. A lot of go back up 10 feet, fall down 5 feet. Go up 10 feet, fall down 5 feet. Back and forth, back and forth. Just because, I mean, the cord's slippery and he's in the water and he's pulling himself up, plus Chris's body too. They're able to get his body back up there. Duncan tells a little story about how him and Chris met and they were trying to find somebody else's shipwreck body and they gave the wife like a shoebox of trinkets because they couldn't find the body and so he's all worried about not wanting to give a shoebox of trinkets. But luckily they have the body and so he's trying to get him back alive. He is able to get him breathing, but he's not responsive. He's just kind of like dead eyes, like just staring at nothing. Not blinking, not talking, not doing anything, but I guess he's breathing somehow. Um,
He gave him mouth to mouth and got him to breathe again.
yeah, but I've never seen it before where they're breathing like that, but literally nothing else.
I haven't either, but it happened.
Um, I mean,
My
this is
guess, my guess is because because I had even wondered while we're watching this, like this dude's gonna have some pretty bad brain damage because when there's a lack of oxygen, that's when you start to get brain damage. And they even said later on that he had nothing. I did read that they kind of believe that the reason why some of this stuff happened is maybe because where he was, the temperature and the pressure was considerably different than, up here on the mainland. So maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, basically once that oxygen started flowing again in his body, he soon, like took a couple minutes, started to come back and was responsive like he normally was.
yep. We see a few minutes of like real life footage of the real life Chris. So that was kind of neat to see about, him getting married. And I guess 3 weeks later, all those guys went and did another trip down there to finish the job that they started, which was a big deal for Duncan because he kind of was feeling pressure for the higher ups to want him to retire, but he was able to go back down there again and do what he loved doing. So, yay, Duncan.
Yep, and that was basically the end of the movie. One of the things that I did really like about this, and I think I mentioned it in the non-spoiler section, that, um, what was his name? Uh, Dave, like he was kind of the hardball in the beginning of the movie, but I think what kind of conveyed through this movie to me is that I think he got humbled a little bit, like brought him back down to uh, a more nicer slash hospitable level of being a person because Duncan had mentioned, in the beginning of the movie that, he's a softie at home, but here at work, he, is kind of a hardball. And I think by the end of this, and witnessing all this crazy stuff, I think he's not so much that anymore. We see him checking on Chris every now and then, and like when he's recovering during those weeks that they're gonna come out of all this.
For 4 days.
Yep. And we also 4 days. Was it 4 days? Oh, I thought because I know we saw one, two, and three. I didn't know when it said last day if it was actually the fourth day or not, but.
The whole trip was supposed to be 28 days, but it got cut short because of the incident. Because there were like 3 or 4 dive teams, but this was the first team to go, and because there was an incident, the other dive teams didn't go at all.
Mm.
And but there was still 4 days of decompression.
I was kind of wondering what the heck they were doing. Like, y'all just sitting there not doing anything? Like, why? I didn't understand why only one of them was out, but that makes sense. But we see Dave like take out a picture of, I think it was his wife and daughter or two daughters. I didn't
I
quite
thought it was two
catch
kids.
two kids.
I think so.
So we see him looking at the picture and, realizing that, in my opinion, life is precious and it can be taken away from you at really any second. So, especially even though you can prepare for anything as much as you can, things can still go wrong. So, yeah. So that is basically the movie. I would be curious to see the documentary that like maybe there is some other stuff that they didn't touch on here on in the film. Like you said, it was an hour and a half, so maybe there is some information that could have made it nine or two hours total. But again, I think they were really trying to hit for that, keep things intense, don't slow it down, and they were really trying to keep that going.
The documentary is approximately the same length of time, too.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, it'll be a bunch of people just talking about things, but yeah. All right. Well, anything else you want to mention about the movie?
Uh, I think that covers it enough.
All right. Well, that was our talk on Last Breath. Again, this is the new Woody Harrelson movie about a diving mission gone wrong. So, if you enjoy this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Drop us a like if you like the video and drop us a comment letting us know your thoughts on Last Breath. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.